All right. Welcome everybody to episode 36, I think. 36 or 37. I've lost track. I'll have to go back and look. Of Tequila Tuesday, where we get together, talk for 90 minutes about various topics, do some sales training, do some leadership training, and I bring in really cool, smart guests who are way better at all this stuff than me, and they talk to you. And they do their thing for about 20, 30 minutes. And then I keep track of everybody who has questions, and I'll take you off mute and you can ask our guest some questions, and we do a Q&A for about an hour or so. I'm really, really happy to have my friend Josh Roth here. If you don't know Josh, he is a sales leader. He's been an SDR sales leader. He's an AE sales leader, working his way up. Will soon be CRO, VP of sales at some big fancy companies. For sure, you can bet on it. Rising star in the industry, LinkedIn, voice, top voice, all that kind of stuff. And fun fact, an absolute Oregon Duck psycho fanatic. And sometimes Josh and I text each other during whatever sports game is on because he is equally as insane as me. And sometimes we need to share in each other's pain or rub it in. Good guy. And he's very excited to be here. He was texting me earlier how fired up he is. So I'm expecting big things. So welcome to Tequila Tuesday, Josh. I'll step out of the way. Everybody who has questions, hit me up in the chat, drop it in public or private, and we'll take you off mute as we go. The floor is yours, Josh.
Awesome. First of all, Scott, thank you so much for having me. If anyone does happen to have the misfortune of following me on Twitter, my recommendation is just go ahead and mute me on Saturdays when Oregon plays. That's just generally the best advice I've got there. Super excited to be here. Super excited to talk career pathing and really just share in both the good and the bad and sometimes the ugly that comes with career pathing, the discussion, the process, how to operationalize that. I can share some just really terrible stories about this, but I've also got really good stories to share and some really fun wins, and really, happy to answer any questions about anything. Scott, you think, do you want me to kind of jump into it, or do we want to start with questions? What do you think?
Let's have you jump into it. Let's talk about what is career pathing. How should somebody think about it when they're getting started in their career, and the middle part of their career, senior part of their career? And I think it would be good to talk about, for people who are in leadership, how to build a career path into their org and their comp plan and what those step ups might look like.
Cool. So I might ask you to unpack some of that with me, but let's kind of start off with just looking at the career path as a whole. And I think the discussion right now is very timely, right? We're in the Great Resignation. I think the data that I saw about 2 weeks ago showed that 3% of the entire US workforce quit their job in the month of August alone, which is a pretty staggering statistic when you really think about how big the US workforce is. And to have 3% of that entire workforce quit in just 1 month out of the year is a pretty wild number to think about. So we'll start kind of when you think about career pathing as you start your career, and we'll kind of move and step our way up. And one of the things I like to think about, and advice that I like to give people that are early in their career, taking a first job, whether it's out of college or kind of stepping out of that intern path, is to think about where it is that you want to go in 2 to 3 years, but more importantly, what is it that you really want to do day to day? And what skills do you want to work on? What skills do you want to build? And what things do you want to actually do every single day in your job? Maybe that's just talking to new people. Maybe that's getting to know people if you like sales. Maybe it's solving problems. Maybe it's more of a service-based role if you want to jump into something like customer service or customer success. But what skills do you really want to work on, use day to day, that really you can operationalize every day in your role? And I think one of the things that I like to think about is, when you're taking that first job, when you're taking that first step in your career, really evaluating the leader and the company as a whole. and to really identify whether those people align with what you want to do. Because I think sometimes the answer is just no. And personally, I got very lucky. My first job out of college, I worked with two sales managers, sales leaders that really aligned with my values and my morals. And I recognize that you don't need to be a pushy, hair slicked back type of, salesperson that you would see, in memes or in, cartoons, but really much more about, what it is that you can align on day to day. And yes, Francois, I'm happy to kind of talk about what Scott, it's all good. You got the hat there. Yeah, Francois, I'm happy to share a little bit about, where I've been and kind of how I stepped up in my career. So I started my career in sports sales. I was an inside sales representative at the New York Mets. I was making 120 cold calls a day, had nothing but a CRM. And I moved up to an account executive role at the New York Mets, actually had like a book of business that I was both renewing, upselling, cross-selling. Yep, LGM, let's go Mets. Love seeing that. I moved into the Mets called it a premium sales manager role. It was really just a fancy title for an enterprise account executive, $1 million quota, selling into like the Googles, the Banks of Americas of the world. And after the third year, I went to our VP and just shared that, I wanted to work at a little bit more of an innovative company, solving really just more day-to-day problems. I think what I told him specifically was I didn't feel that moving the pitcher's mound up or back by a millimeter counted as innovation to me. And so I left the sports industry and started working in very early stage tech. Worked at a very small recruitment SaaS company called RSC Solutions, where I think I really learned a lot of very valuable but very tough lessons there, about career pathing, what leaders you can and maybe shouldn't trust, some yellow flags and red flags to look at when you're applying to new roles, and then moved into really true SaaS at a small company called CarePoint. We were a Series A company that was based on healthcare rewards. So we were both B2B and B2C, and learned a lot there about trying to take on too many responsibilities at once. And we'll certainly share a bunch of good lessons there. And then moved to WalkMe as a BDR manager. So we were managing a strategic and enterprise, and we moved into the commercial space of BDRs, had a team of 20, and we had one manager underneath me. Despite the title, I was a second line manager there. And now currently I'm the senior director of inside sales at Lob. We are a direct mail SaaS platform that actually allows you to send like a letter, a check, a postcard, all right within your tech stack. So you can send it out of your CRM, you can send it out of our platform as well, but it actually integrates with the rest of your either MarTech or CRM stack. And we currently have a SDR team, which is the inbound team that rolls into me. And we've got an SDR manager there, a BDR team with a BDR manager that rolls in. And then we also have a commercial sales team, little small sales team of 3 people right now that we're excited to grow in 2022. Francois, thank you for kind of doing a little gut check there and helping me kind of like establish the base there. And that's what kind of we're doing right now. And yes, Scott, thank you for sharing. Yes, as a side hustle, I did start STR Defenders along with 4 other awesome people: Kyle Coleman, Nikki Ivy, Nisha Parikh, and Tom Bocard in April of 2020, when we were acquired by Pavilion in June of this year. So as you can probably tell, I like to keep myself pretty busy outside of the 3 hours on Saturdays when the Oregon Ducks play football. So that's kind of where I've been in my career. And one of the things that I've really found out, and I'll spill a little bit of tea. I was texting Scott about this because I was thinking about like what stories can I share that are both good and bad. And I figure, we'll start off with a little bit more of a scary story. We're approaching Halloween. Figure that scary stories are probably a good trend as of right now. But a couple of the companies that I mentioned earlier on, some smaller startups that I worked for, it really shined a light for me and taught me a very valuable lesson that not every single leader, not every single company that you're going to work for is going to either A, have any interest about helping you grow your career, B, have any sort of processes in place that helps you learn and helps you upskill and really kind of fill some of the skill gaps that you're looking to solve for, or C, even have an interest in it. Even like think that that's a necessary aspect to really have enablement for and ensure that their leaders and their managers and their C-level executives have a deep and thorough understanding of what that process actually looks like, sounds like, and I think most importantly, feels like. Because ultimately, if me as the employee, if I don't feel like I'm learning, if I'm not daily looking at what I'm doing and realizing, wow, I am actually learning something really key every day, it doesn't actually matter what's in place because I'm probably going to take another job. And at that point, it's too late to actually save that employee. They're generally so disengaged in their own job search that really, even if you try to install this, it's going to be too late. So really like having that understanding and learning that lesson early in my sales leadership career was a really hard lesson. And unfortunately, it was a little bit of a gut check for me on how to evaluate companies in the hiring process and really vet out leaders for whether or not they have processes like this in place. And if they don't, are they trying to install these processes, or are they really just interested in talking about it and not actually operationalizing it day to day? Do they just want to hire talent and let them loose and basically tell people to figure it out? So I'm happy to like go through, kind of maybe some of the early warning signs, and then Scott, maybe we get into like what it actually looks and feels like to operationalize a career pathing discussion with individuals on the team. Is that maybe a decent way for us to move forward?
Yeah, that sounds great. Sounds
cool.
great.
So in my experience, there's a couple of different ways that I look for companies and try to identify companies that both have a good career pathing process and those that don't. And the first is I hate to get into this, but it's really just doing your own due diligence and almost just trolling around LinkedIn. So for example, when I got to WalkMe, when I first got the job offer, what I said was, I'm really excited to receive the offer. I'd like to think about this for a couple of days. Is that okay? The answer was yes. The first thing I did was I started looking at different employees at WalkMe to see any upward mobility. Are AEs moving into sales leadership roles? Are SDRs moving to AE roles? Are product managers becoming directors of product, right? Anything that I can see that shows me a defined success metric that actually shows upward mobility at the company. And this was unfortunately something that I learned the hard way because I never did that before. And then I would accept jobs. I would come to the company and I would start talking to people, hey, like, how can you grow at the company? What's the right opportunity? And you hear things like, oh, you need to have this last name, right? Because you're not related to the CEO, you're in a tough spot, right? Or, oh yeah, we don't really like grow people from within, we really just hire externally for those that already have the experience. And at that point, it's too late, right? You've already accepted the job, you're already enthralled in the organization, and now you need to make the decision whether you want to try to be the needle in the haystack, the person that breaks through the glass and gets promoted, or are you going to be the person that's going to go look for another job? And you never want to find yourself in that circumstance. And for me, the easiest way is to just stalk on LinkedIn. Who's getting promoted? How frequently? Where are they being promoted to? Are they really learning in the next role, or are they just moving into a new role after that? A lot of questions that really it takes some asking and some digging.
Josh,
to really, yeah, go ahead.
Can I interrupt for a second? Can you give an example of one or two of the types of questions that somebody might ask?
Yes, great gut check there. So one of the questions that I like to ask is, tell me about a success story of someone that's been promoted. Tell me about what their attainment was at the next level in their career. Tell me about how you got them there, and tell me about the promotion process. What did that look like? So are they going through some sort of certification program? Is it based upon performance and attainment? Is it based upon knowledge? All of those questions, I want to hear a story. I don't actually just want metrics of this many people got promoted after this amount of time. I don't actually so much care about that. I want the story. Tell me how you got that person to the next level. Scott, what was your other, what was the other one? Because you asked two really good ones there.
No, I just said, what's an example of one or two questions that you might ask somebody to kind of flush this out? And then I was adding into the chat that there's this framework called the TED framework that this guy, Casey Jaycox, I don't know if anybody knows him, has talked about. And I've been like super into it lately because it's so simple. It's just tell me, explain to me, or describe to me. And that forces people to tell a story rather than just say a metric or, you know, a yes, no, or one specific thing, like they hit quota. No, it's like, explain to me what they did. Tell me about a time that somebody did this. Describe to me the last three people, how long they'd been there before they got promoted to this. It's that kind of structure. So I was just looking for some examples of questions. So keep rolling. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I appreciate that. That's actually a really, really good mention there. What I like to follow up I like the TED framework. What I really like to follow up that framework on is tell me what this person did well. So if someone's explaining, you know, the story of how someone got promoted, I want to know 2 to 3 things that person that is the protagonist of your story, what did they do really well? And is there now a framework based off of this story? Were you able to operationalize this at scale? Or was this very particular to that one specific person that got promoted? And really what I'm trying to dig out in that circumstance is this person special? Or did they follow some sort of process that I can then put myself into and move through the organization, move through that promotion process? To me, these are kind of critical aspects of the promotion process, because you want to dig in to find out, again, like, is this a special circumstance or is this scalable as the organization grows? What other questions?
Josh, can you talk a little bit about, and then we've got Wayne has a question, and then I've got a question from Christian as well, but can you talk about something that might be an indicator that this path is scalable versus not scalable?
Yeah,
not everybody might not totally understand what that means.
Yep, you mind if I share my screen here?
Go ahead.
So we can kind of get into a little bit about kind of what that looks like. So this is a copy of our BDR to AE certification that I built out. And really, you know, when we're going through a BDR to AE certification, you can see it all the time on LinkedIn. BDR is asking, how long is it going to take me to get promoted? What do I need to do to get promoted? How can I be successful in my next role? And we built out this framework when I was at WalkMe, and it worked very effectively. So we promoted 8 BDRs to AEs over the last October. So 13 months. And all of those AEs had over 100% attainment as account executives. So how we process this and how we built out a scalable framework is by putting everyone effectively through this certification process. So the first stage, in order to basically qualify for the certification, you needed to have 100% quota attainment. You needed to have at least be in good standing with your KPIs, right? Don't have people coming through and saying, why are you making 5 calls in a day, right? It doesn't mean that you need to hit some specific number, just be in good standing. And then we also want people to fill out the BDR scorecard. And really what the BDR scorecard is for is really like, do you know how to tell a good story? And are you able to really brand yourself, right? And that's really all we're testing for. You know, I want to know that you can be data-driven here, but it's a box check. Here is where I really want you to tell a story, right? Have you won any specific awards, right? We have a monthly pancake award where we give out, specific awards to people. We try to keep it fun. We try to keep it light. But here we get into the stories, right? What are your AEs saying about you? Do they love working with you? Are the meetings that you're booking them, are they value adds? AE directors, are you working at such a high level that your AE director is saying, oh goodness, like when you get promoted, we're going to lose pipeline, right? Enablement quotes, are you driving enablement for the rest of the team? Are you finding best practices and then showing your peers how to operationalize that? Are you attending conferences? Did you go to the Hard No tour with Scott Leese and Amy Volas in Las Vegas, right? Did you go to SaaStr, right? Are you looking for ways to upskill? Are you asking for additional training? Are you a part of Scott's patron group, right? Are you a part of Rev Genius or Pavilion? Are you creating team resources? So that's really what we look for in the first stage. And it's really just, can you tell a good story? If you're a salesperson, if you're an account executive, you got to be able to tell a good story. And that's all we're really testing for. Stage 2 is the sales readiness task sheet. These are very specific courses that we have built internally to help you learn, help you understand how to be a strong AE. And you can see the links to all of these courses in here, right? We've got objection handling, sales methodology, prospecting, understanding the sales cycle, technical proficiency. It's really, we really try to dig in with you to understand, do you have the tactical understanding of how to be an AE? And then after that, it's really just role plays, right? Show us how you would do the job. So we'll put you in mini kind of like 1v1 skill role plays where we'll give you a scenario, right? Your prospect gave you a verbal agreement, but now they're walking that back because another priority has taken the spot of what we're trying to do at Lob. How do you handle that situation? That's an example of what we would do with stage 3. And that's where we get into pass, no pass. So now we're actually scoring you on, did you do a good job or did you not? And if you didn't, it's okay. Just redo it. There's no punishment. It's just, we want you to be proficient with it. Stage 4, we get into a discovery call where you're going to do a one-on-one role play with me. We're going to dig into how you're going to do a discovery call. We actually give you a scenario. I've built a couple of scenarios. I think one of them is you're a product manager at HelloSign trying to evaluate for efficiencies. They will study the role play just like you would kind of preparing for a discovery call. And you jump in and do a discovery call. And then here we've got the keystone role play where we're going to have additional sales leaders, probably myself, maybe a hero if we're lucky to get 30 minutes at a time, probably a sales director, maybe a sales enablement director, all coming in and doing a full scale demo where it is your job to dig in and figure out what our priorities are, where Lob fits in, if Lob fits in, what product, all of the above. And again, we've got pass, no passes here. Once you've passed the BDR to AE certification, you are what we considered certified, and you will be put into a pool of applicants that is eligible to apply for an AE. It doesn't guarantee you the job, but it does allow you to go through the process. Then in the process, we're going to ask a lot of those same questions, right? We're going to dig in even further to understand what your proficiency is. And really what your competency is, right? Are you someone that can come in and really be successful from day one? The certification is driven so that really you are able to, what we consider be a plug and play, right? When you get to be an AE on day one, can you be productive? And are you going to be able to crush your quota at WalkMe? The answer to that thus far is unequivocally yes. I think the lowest attainment any AE at WalkMe that was coming from the BDR org, I believe was 131% to their number. And we had some really crazy attainment numbers at the AE level of those that came from the BDR org. And that's the type of thing that when someone talks to me about, Scott, answering your questions, circling all the way back to, is it scalable? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, have you built something that I can go through and understand specifically what it is that I need to do to get promoted? What do I need to do to show the competency the competency and the rigor that allows me to not only be successful as a BDR, but be successful as an AE.
All right, Josh, we've got a couple of questions here. Wayne, let's go to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hey, Josh, nice to see you face to face for the first time. I love that framework. That's just, anyone coming into a business seeing that is going to be full of confidence that they do a good job. They're going to progress. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's incredible. I love that. So I'm going to take you back to your career progression. I'm really interested in what took you from being like a lead hunter, enterprise AE, and so that's how you started out, I understand. And then your move into management was actually in the BDR leadership function. That doesn't strike me as necessarily a common or natural progression. I could be mistaken there. What I'm most interested in is what your thought process was and has been to take you from enterprise AE into leading a BDR team.
That's a great question. I don't know that I've actually gotten that question before. So thank you for asking that. For me, I think it probably had to do with in between the Mets and WalkMe, I had some real difficult lessons that I learned working at early stage tech companies where I felt that the leadership was not only subpar, but actually really, I wouldn't even call it leadership. I would actually just call it poor management. There was some really poor leadership habits that were being exhibited. I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to be like a complainer, but I saw that and I realized, oh my gosh, not all sales leaders are like the two people that I started my career with. And when I started my career, all I really cared about was selling. What's the next new deal that I can sell? What's the next cool logo I can sell to? And that was really enjoyable for me. But going through these experiences where the leadership was subpar, I realized what a need for good, honorable, and I would say strong moral leadership exists in the market, or maybe lack thereof. And I realized that I could really fill that gap and be someone that people could look to and learn from and say, this is someone that does sales in a moral way, in an ethical way, and in the right way, that I felt people that I had been on teams of in the past just didn't have that muscle or understanding. And when I started understanding what the process was in sales, SDR, BDR, AE, it really felt like SDRs were being left behind. They were being treated as just an SDR, the entry-level salesperson. And that just didn't sit right with me. I felt like, in a world that we live in where, pipeline models and pipeline is everything to organizations, growth organizations, it felt like SDRs were just getting the short end of the stick. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to be a change maker, not only at a company, but in the industry, in the function, and in the motion. And that's what took me to SDR leadership and now, back to AE leadership, which I'm a little bit more accustomed to and have the experience with. But the reason that I enjoy having SDRs and BDRs role to me is I think I have a good understanding of what they need and, more importantly, what they want, and giving to them what they are looking for in a very nicely packaged way that helps them understand at a very basic level, what do I need to do to get promoted?
Thanks, Josh. That's all. Yeah, SDRs, like, for me, in an enterprise sales org, the rest of the company moves at their pace. If your team is like going at the right pace, is like banging that drum really hard, the rest of the team goes at that pace. If your team is not, then the whole company slows down. So kudos to you for flying the flag for SDRs. I have one follow-up question. Can I ask it quickly, Scott? Do you mind?
Go ahead, bud.
Thank you.
I'm going to let you ask it because I feel bad for you that Man U got pasted 5-0. So
You
go ahead.
agreed not to bring that up.
You ask your question, man. You should feel glad I'm not wearing my kit and just running.
Well, you said you were, so I'm kind of
Yeah, I took it easy. Go ahead.
I can still see the scarf. What's your career path look like then? So you've got enterprise AE, BDR leadership. So what does your career path look like from this point?
Josh, tell me what you'd be when you want to grow up.
For me, I really do want to be a CRO. I think that running a sales organization and creating career paths for a number of different roles that I have experience with, I think is fairly unique. I've seen a lot of, VPs of sales, CROs that, they say things like, how dare you cold call me? Or, I'm not going to make a cold call. And to me, I just my heart breaks. So I'm just you don't know what it's like. Being someone that's made 120 calls today and been told to, basically every cuss word in the book and probably then some. I really kind of want to fly the flag and plant the flag for the SDRs, the BDRs, the AEs that I've been there before. I know what it's like, but I also understand what it takes to grow at 100%. And I think the mixture of knowing what it's like and really having done the work, I can both lead by example, but also lead with lead by just lead by example. I think that's probably the best way to say it. And not only show the team how to do it, but show the team how to do it well and have a very deep understanding of what accountability means at each level. And then how to hold the team accountable to those high standards. And that's why I think I could be a good fit as a CRO, but also why I would enjoy it.
Awesome. Yeah, I don't know how many CROs truly understand the SDR function. That's the other one. So awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
All right, Josh, I got a question from Christian Wolf, who can't be here, but is going to watch the recording. And I promised him that I would ask his question. Okay, so I'm going to read it off to you. I'm currently in an SMB treasury management / payments account executive role for a large bank, and I'm pursuing a remote mid-market SaaS role. I've had a few interviews. I've been told I don't have the relevant experience based on my deal sizes and sales cycle. After listening to a Tequila Tuesday where Scott talked about this question of you can go as somebody who's hungry and eager to learn or somebody who's stuck in their ways. And if you give me a shot, here's what I'll do. I feel like I have a good response, but what are the cues that make you roll your eyes when someone doesn't get it as someone's trying to bust into a mid-market role and vice versa?
It's a really interesting question. Having been someone that has been told that for 7 months consecutively, that you don't have the experience and sorry, we're looking for someone with more SaaS experience. This one hits home a little bit just because I was on the other end of the phone when, I was told by, hiring manager after hiring manager, recruiter after recruiter that, hey, you don't fit the bill, sorry. I think that there's a couple of things that I like to do in this circumstance. And the first is in the interview process, call it out early, right? Call out the elephant in the room and ensure that the hiring manager understands that what you might lack in the institutional knowledge, you will make up for with the hunger and the grit. And the way that I like to do that is when I was interviewed by plenty of companies for a number of different roles. One of them was actually at the Mets, when I became a premium sales manager, really an enterprise AE. I didn't have the experience they were looking for. They wanted someone, that had been there for 4 to 5 years. And, I brought my metrics, I brought all my data, and I said, look, you can have someone that's been there, done that, and that has worked their way to the role and will, kind of put one foot in front of the other, but that's not me. I'm full speed ahead and I'm going to run the race. I'm going to put, I'm taking 2 steps for everyone else's 1 step. And I showed that with my metrics. And what I said is, here's all of the calls, here's all the calls I've made, I think at that point, it was like 65,000 calls. And I think the nearest peer to me was somewhere in like the 30,000s. And I showed the same thing from a revenue perspective. And I said, you can get there in your revenue, but you'll get there faster with me. And bringing the data and having that at my disposal to back up my argument of I am better because I'm hungry and because I'm eager takes it to the next level. And having some clout and data to really like drive home your point is really critical. And I think, I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this as someone that has a CRM, but like go take screenshots, go into your Salesforce, go into your outreach, take screenshots of your metrics, go prove it, go prove what you're doing and go bring that to the hiring manager and say, look, you don't believe me? Here, look at this data. Like someone that comes to me with that data of here's what I've done, here's what I'm going to do for you. It takes objections off the table. You're removing the roadblocks that theoretically exist to bring you into a role because you may not have the institutional knowledge, but what you might in theory or on paper lack in that, you're going to make up for with hunger. To me, 10 out of 10, I'm going to bet on that person, the eagerness and the hunger, rather than someone that's been there before and done it before, because someone who's eager and hungry to me means that you're going to be very coachable. You're going to be a quick learner and you're going to operationalize feedback. Whereas someone that has institutional knowledge to me means that you may have bad habits. You may be someone that is harder to coach or harder to mold. And that to me is actually a bigger risk than someone who's eager and hungry and willing to learn.
Very good. Very good. Anthony, you're next. Anthony had a question and then we'll let you get back to it unless we have other questions that flow in.
Hi, Josh. My question has to do with job security. When you talked about earlier about promotion and upward mobility, is that equal to job security?
Boy, that's a great question. I suppose it depends on the context, because I think job security in and of itself always has a certain aspect of the needs of the business in it, right? So I think about like, if you're at a company that's going, that has a sales motion based upon the product as opposed to like the geography, and maybe that product is just not doing well, or maybe, the industry has innovated in a way that your product just either hasn't kept up or maybe has been rendered somewhat useless. I could see in that circumstance where there might be a little less job security. However, if you're a top performer, particularly if you're a top performer that's close to revenue, there's always going to be a place for you, right? Someone's always going to want to hire a top performer, particularly, in an account executive or a sales leader that really understands what it takes to get to their number. I think there's always going to be a level of job security. If it's not at your company, at a different one. And I'll give you an example. When I was at CarePoint, we were crushing our numbers. We did very, very well. We had no tech stack. We had nothing but a couple of phones in an office. And we went from 0 to about 2 million of ARR. But for whatever reason, our CEO was just unable to raise a round. And so he had to shut the company down. And he basically couldn't pay people. And, while that was frustrating and somewhat out of my control, I knew I would land somewhere. It was just about finding, where that landing spot was. So, while there's always, I think, when it comes to job security, going to be aspects of that's out of your control, that is generally going to be contextual. If you're hitting your numbers, if you're performing at a high level, there's always going to be a place for you. There's always going to be someone that's going to want to hire you.
Thank you so much.
All right, keep going, Josh.
Sure. So I guess like just kind of open question to those that are on the call. Like, is there anything that you want me to double tap into? Like, is there something that you want me to share about maybe like yellow flags or red flags in an interview process? What is it that would be helpful for everyone on the call for me to talk about? Because honestly, I could talk about this topic forever.
Here we
All right,
go.
we got
Arlie,
one.
come on, don't be shy, Arlie.
So I'm just curious how much greater you think the chances are of breaking into a leadership role in a new company versus pursuing an internal promotion, and why those chances are greater when you look at outside opportunities.
That's a great question. I think that I always hate to answer questions like this. I think, again, it kind of comes back to context, but I think part of maybe why there could be increased chances of getting into a leadership role outside of your current company is sometimes at your current company, you're seen a certain way, right? People have impressions of you, you fall into
pigeonholed.
exactly. You're pigeonholed into a specific aspect, right? And I'll give you an example, right? Hopefully, people at WalkMe won't hate me for this, but at WalkMe, for whatever reason, I was kind of pigeonholed into, BDR leadership. Your next step is going to be BDR director. And, for me, I was kind of, I thought that was funny because I was like, this is my first ever BDR SDR leadership job was at WalkMe. I have 3-4 years of AE leadership experience. So it was funny to me to be told that I was something when for 3 years there was something I knew I wasn't, which was an SDR leader. And now here I am being pigeonholed into SDR leadership. So finally, once, after I was offered this opportunity at Lob, only then did WalkMe come back to me and say, "Oh, actually, we've got this AE leadership job. Would you like it?" And I had said, well, too late. Ink is dry. I'm moving on. And I think that's where it can sometimes be easier to break in outside because you get to tell your own story. You're in control of your story. You're in control of your branding. Whereas at a current company, you're not always in control of it because people have impressions of you. They think of you in a certain way. And I think sometimes that can be difficult to break out of, particularly if it's a very connected company and everyone talks to each other and works together. It can be hard to break out of it because you may, your next hiring manager or the hiring manager might be asking peers around you, what do you think of this person? What do you think of that person? And if they say, yeah, they're a good, SDR, BDR manager, that can sink you. Whereas if you go to, interview at other companies, that perception doesn't exist. You create that perception.
I think a lot of times the fastest way to move up is to move out.
Yep. And it's so unfortunate, right? It's so unfortunate that that's an actual truth, right? Is to move up, you need to leave. And sometimes it's just based upon the demands of the business, but also sometimes it's just based upon people's perception not being accurate, and not being willing to trust that you can step up into a bigger role and perform at a high level, which is again, it's something that's wrong with the way leaders are looking at their teams right now. And I'll give you an example. So I at Lob, I started as inside sales director. I knew I was going to need functional leaders for our inbound team, our outbound team, soon probably our commercial sales team. And I had an option. Do I hire from the outside and bring in a BDR manager that has seen the movie before, that can get a team up to speed? Or do I promote one of our BDRs who I knew was dying for the role, right? And I opted to promote from within because that's the culture that we want to create. We want to create a culture of learning, of growth, and of empowerment to our team. And I knew it was going to take, a lot more enablement. I knew it was going to take a lot more coaching, but if that's the culture we want to create, you can't say one thing and do another. So, we promoted a gentleman, Kyle Viator. If anyone wants to check him out on LinkedIn, we promoted him from a BDR to a BDR manager. He's about a month into the job, and the areas where, we knew he was going to need to dig in, which is on the people skills, on the coaching side, on the training side, on the leading side, we are, but we're also leaning into his strengths, which is performance, which is an understanding how to do the job. It's the competency that he really gets. And I think what you miss in some areas, you make up for in other areas. And at the end of the day, it just boils down to what culture you want to create and how much effort and time you're willing to put in to create it. And I think a lot of people are willing to, wave the flag and say, promote from within. And then you see them post a job on LinkedIn for an SDR manager, BDR manager, AE, SDR director. And, you're just left thinking your words are hollow. And that's not the person that I want to be. It's not the leader I want to be. And it's unfortunate, Scott, to your point, that the fastest way to move up is to move out, because it shouldn't be the case. But for the most part, it is.
That was a really thoughtful answer. I appreciate that.
Good question. Let's go to Jill. Jill, you had a question.
Hey, Josh, good stuff. I also agree that it's a shame that companies always think that it's better to find people outside the company when they've spent so much money developing people inside the company. But that is the way that it happens typically. Although we do see a lot of people going back to companies that they've left because of those reasons. So their value was appreciated, but unfortunately not in the moment. Speaking of value appreciated in the moment, when do you know it's the right time to leave? Like, how long do you give it? If you're at a new gig and, it's been a few months, but things aren't shaping up the way they said they were, or there were some things promised and things promised when you interviewed, and it doesn't seem like they can deliver. It's not necessarily that they can't deliver because it's some ominous plot to screw you over, but that they just don't have it together or have the tools in place and they're unwilling to spend in certain areas. I don't know. John Stern, good answer.
Great question. I think to me, there's two different answers here. The first is you got to go with your gut. If your gut is telling you that it might be time to look, it may be time to look. And I think that sometimes you just need to go off your gut. I think the other time is by asking the right questions. And for me, it took quite a while. So I'll share my experience leaving WalkMe, and Scott actually knows this well. I actually buzzed Scott when
we talked about it a little bit, right? Yeah,
we did. And it was a hard decision for me because I felt like I was learning at WalkMe, but the moment that it hit me at WalkMe was I had a team of roughly 20 with a manager, and all of the managers would go around and we would do our, what's your quota? What's your attainment? What are you tracking to on a weekly basis? And my number was always higher than every other manager in the meeting combined. And it never bothered me. It was always like I'll get mine, just perform. Well, 14, 15-ish months passed, and our teams had hit their number every single month. And we went around the same meeting that we always do. And I realized in that moment that, like, wait a second, why am I getting paid the same amount to contribute 4x the amount of any other manager and more than every other manager combined? That doesn't seem right to me. So I had a conversation with my manager, who I really like, is a mentor, is a friend, is someone that I genuinely think very highly of. But he said something in that moment that I didn't appreciate, which was, Josh, you're talking about your career too much. It's starting to get around and you need to tone it down. And
I think you waited 14 months. I think you were pretty patient.
And that was the moment to me where I realized, awesome person, a friend, someone that, like, I genuinely look to still as a mentor, But that was the moment for me where I was like, you know what? To me, there's no bar of like, you've hit your capacity on the amount of times you can talk about your career path and you can't talk about it more. I don't think that bar exists. And to me, if someone if a teammate of mine is coming to me discussing their career, it generally means one of two things. Number one, they're not learning enough and I need to invest in their enablement. Or number two, they're not seeing a defined career path to move forward. And I need to be more transparent, more honest, and give them an understanding as to what it's going to take to move forward, even if that's something that they're not going to like. Even if that answer is, I am sorry, but there's no business need right now for an additional AE, an additional sales manager, an additional director. Even if that's the answer, I have to be honest with them. And I didn't feel like those two things were being met at WalkMe. And that's when I started to just very quietly look around. Didn't really apply to any jobs, but I did, just put feelers out there. And Lob came to me and said, look, we want you to be a second line manager and we'll pay you for it. And by the way, we want you to also manage AEs. And it was tough. I got the offer. And even after I got the offer, my mentality was great. I'm going to leverage this into a bigger offer at WalkMe. And it wasn't until I started actually using Amy's scorecard and realized, wait a second, Lob's score is higher than WalkMe's. Where's the gap? And then I talked to a buddy of mine like Scott, and I was like, Scott, like, can you help me understand it? And Scott, you were awesome, man. Like, you were basically just like, Josh, I don't know why you're on the phone with me. It's pretty clear to me that you know the answer. You just need to admit it to yourself.
That sounds like something I would say.
And here we are today.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do like, though, that you gave it some time and consideration. And, I do think that there's a delicate balance. As salespeople, we're not known being the most patient people. So, sometimes there are other things outside your control that if you give it a little time and investigate a little deeper, you can see another path. So
you're spot on.
All right.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Let's go to Tiffany. Tiffany, you had a great question.
And I actually can talk now because I'm the only one left in the office. So I was really worried that I was not going to be able to come out, so to speak.
Perfect timing. Also, you need to get your ass home. It's late.
Yeah. No. I'm in California. I'm in Reno. So it's almost 5. It's not too bad.
That's late in my world, but continue.
Yeah. So yeah, I am actively interviewing, and Scott, thanks for your advice. Just want to acknowledge here on this platform. Thank you. But Josh, what are those red flags, yellow flags that you have that let you know during an interview process? Because you're speaking exactly to my reason for wanting to leave my current position, even though, to your point, Jill, I haven't been here very long. It's time to make a move, and I've gotten really close with a couple, but anyway, just looking for your input there.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of different yellow and red flags. When speaking specifically about career pathing and promotion process, my favorite red flag or yellow flag is actually 2 words. It depends. And typically the context that I'm using this in is, if you ask the hiring manager you're interviewing with, what does it take and what are the signs to have me move into the next role? And that hiring manager says, well, it depends. My gut reaction is, on what? Like, what the performance standards are, right? They have a quota. If the person's hitting their quota and crushing their quota, that's a big box that's checked, right? So what else is it depending on? Are you looking for, if it's a sales leadership role, right? What I might say is, well, it depends on what role you are looking for, right? If it's a mid-market AE role, or Scott, I think the question that earlier that came in was SMB to mid-market.
Yeah.
Right. What I might be looking for in that circumstance is, can you close multi-year deals? Right? Are you closing 2- and 3-year deals? Is your ASP or average ASD average deal size, is that higher than some of your peers? Right. So so I might have different metrics or things that I'm looking at if you're trying to go from SMB to mid-market, or if you're trying to move into sales leadership. In that circumstance, it might be, what have you taught to people, right? What processes have you scaled? What best practices have you taught the team? Who else can verify that you helped them hit their quota? So it might depend on the role, but what it shouldn't depend on is if you are specific in, I want to go from SMB AE to mid-market AE, there shouldn't be too much that depends. If I'm a sales leader, I should know exactly what metrics I'm looking at to say, here's what I am looking for in a candidate to move from SMB to mid-market to commercial, right? That is pretty self-explanatory. And to me, anyone that says, well, it depends, is a yellow flag that you may not have a defined process built out. And I now need to do significantly more due diligence to figure out whether you're a person of your word and that I can trust that and I can see people moving up, and maybe you just don't have it as defined as a BDR to AE certification, or does this not exist? Can I not find people that have been promoted? And do I need to reevaluate whether this is the right fit for me?
No, and I think that's awesome. I have an interview with the hiring manager tomorrow, and she was promoted from within to her current position. So these are great prompts for me to ask tomorrow.
That's a good early sign.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Kaylee, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
I'm just driving, so I'm not going to be on video. But Josh, it's been awesome so far, and you answered my question a little bit with Jill's question, but I'm going to tweak mine a little bit. So I have been listening to my gut and think it's time for me to make a move potentially, but also my gut's saying stay for a period to see if our new VP of sales that was hired can make a difference, because I feel like I'm learning a lot about how to turn around a startup that didn't scale their enterprise sales team and their sales team in general properly. So plus I have like some commission stuff I'm waiting for to come in January. So my question for you is, is that an adequate amount of time, or is that a gut thing too, to see if the VP of sales is able to really turn things around within the organization?
I think that's totally fair. I mean, you're believing in the best in people, which for me is like always something that I'm going to advocate for, because I always like to believe in the best in people. Kind of on the flip side to that, right? It's also never a bad idea to have an offer in your back pocket for you to leverage. I don't know how many people would necessarily share that. Scott, I don't know if you would even.
I share it all the time. And Amy and I get in a fight about this all the time on TNS, by the way. I am 100% in your camp.
So good to know. But for me, it's, you got to look out for number one, right? And you got to look out for yourself. Who knows what offer might be out there that offer that's a big number. That's a number that kind of changes the way that you live, the lifestyle or whatever it is, right? If that's out there and you can leverage it, go leverage it, because it's never a bad thing to be wanted. It's also never a bad thing to present a competing offer of, hey, look, I want to stay here. I'll give you a first right of refusal, but I have this on the table, right? So in my personal opinion, if you're able to juggle both between, continuing to sell at a high level and interviewing, it's never a bad thing to show up and have your VP of sales or the new VP of sales realize, oh, I got to keep a top performer because, she's already looking.
So what do you think about being honest with recruiters? Because I have started taking a couple of calls. Like, is it, hey, I'm looking to move, in January, or is it just not telling them the timeline and seeing how things play out?
I think generally, and
don't be shy, Josh. I can feel you getting shy. I feel you getting shy and nervous right now.
No, I'm more just thinking like of the right way to say this, right? I really respect.
Haley likes direct feedback, Josh.
I really respect.
Yeah, Scott doesn't hold back, so don't feel like you have to hold back.
All right, fair enough. So if that's the case, I would not share that at all, because recruiters, their goal is to fill the role immediately, right? So if you're coming in and saying, hey, my timeline is January, maybe February, right? If I'm a recruiter, I'm saying, well, this job's never going to get filled in the next month and a half. I got to go look for other candidates. Personally, again, like look out for number one. And I think that the best thing to do is hold on to your timeline until it is absolutely necessary. And look, if the offer is right, and the offer is something that you're like, whoa, and you're blown away by it, my guess is you might take the offer, right? But it's got to get to that area for you to really feel like it's worth my time. It's totally fine for you to take the interview, go through the process, get an offer and feel like, yeah, it's an okay offer, but I'm not ready to jump at it right now. So personally, I wouldn't share it.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thanks, Kaylee, for the question.
Good question.
Kelsey had a question.
Hey Josh, how's it going?
How's it going?
Good. So just some background before I ask this question. I work as a CSM at Dooley full-time and also have my own writing agency. So that's kind of where this is coming from. But I'm curious how having your full-time role juxtaposes with having your own agency or business, and what lessons you've kind of brought into your own business or company that you've taken with you from your full-time role to make it successful.
Yeah, great question. So this is actually something that I do as well. So I obviously did SDR Defenders last year. I do advising right now as well for small startups. And I think there's a couple of lessons that I've learned. First of all, anything I learn in my day-to-day at my job is something that I will immediately pull into my business. It is completely fair. It's my knowledge now, and I get to choose what I do with it. So whatever you learn at work is fair game for you outside of work. I think a couple of lessons that I've learned just, trying to kind of balance both and doing both is, number one, vetting clients is really important. I've had a couple of clients that are very nice people, but they try to book on my calendar. Like if it's Tuesday, they try to book at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. And, I've shared that, look, I book a week and a half to 2 weeks out at all times. It's easier to just put something on the calendar weekly. So I know what time it is. I'm there, I'm prepared, as opposed to doing this ad hoc process. The client decided that they didn't want to operationalize that. They wanted to just keep trying to book on my calendar whenever. And I just told the person, that very nice person, but like, I can't operate in that way. And I just don't think that we're a good fit. So for me, when I'm going to do advising, I set aside 2.5 hours. It's about 6:30 to 8:30 on a daily basis. That's available for me to do anything non-work related. But once 9 o'clock hits on a Monday through Friday, I'm in the zone. I'm working. I am, my minimum expectation for myself is I'm going to hit all of the numbers every single quarter with every single person. And until our entire team is at 100% to quota, that reflects on me. That means I've got work to do. That means I can improve. And I think for you, like the way that I might operationalize that is similar, is pick a time that you feel like you are available to advise and put that on the calendar, block it off so that every week, and Nikki, I see you on here, you and I knew every Thursday morning, 7 to 8 a.m., it was SDR Defenders, right? And we knew every Thursday morning, nothing else could happen. And because it was on the calendar, we were able to prepare accordingly. So for me, I do the same thing. I just block my calendar 6:30 to 8:30 every day to do whatever it is I want to do. It could be working out if I'm not doing advising. But I do think that what you learn in your advising can have application to your job and vice versa. But what knowledge you get, that's yours to keep. Did that answer your question? I just want to make sure I got that.
No, it's really interesting. Like I always have a lot of questions around, mostly I think what I'm dealing with right now that Scott knows a lot too is like developing my ICP for my writing clients. So I think I'm trying to currently take away what works and what I'm learning from developing that within full-time and how I can do that within my own business. Cause right now I'm in that kind of holding period of like, they're great people, but they're failing, or they're great people and it's not fitting, or all those things. So the calendar is like less my struggle, and it's more about dialing into the people and the process there. but it's still
Got it. Okay. So do you have any clients that you've worked with in the past that you can talk with?
Yes, I do.
I would recommend doing just like a soft check-in with them and just asking them like, hey, what worked well? What would you have liked to see that I wasn't able to provide? And would you consider this a success? For me, doing some people call them, I think, like postmortems. Those were very effective for me in really helping to shape what my ICP is. And for me, in my advising, I know that I go typically Series A through Series B at the latest, really working with sales organizations that have generally between about 0 and 8 people at them. And the way that I got to that was asking a number of these clients, like, was I able to provide the right type of feedback? Was it something you were looking for? How well do you think this went? And what was the impact? Like, what was impacted in your business after the project was complete? And what I noticed was, when I went to like a little bit of a late stage Series B or Series C, the impact wasn't as significant. Same as when organizations had over 10 salespeople, that was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. And so the impact wasn't as significant as when organizations had 1, 2, 3 salespeople. And getting that understanding was a blind spot for me before, but having that conversation, I was able to identify it, and it helped me shape my own ICP.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Cynthia, are you ready?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hey, Josh, a question for you. What do you think is the most effective way to engage with possible mentors or sponsors? I joined a new company, and historically, I've avoided this because I hate looking like a suck up, but I do want to grow my career. I think there's like a lot of opportunities. How do you authentically seek these people out? Because really, that's how things are done, especially at a larger company.
Yeah, I think the first lesson I learned in the mentee-mentor relationship is that it's not just a give relationship, it's actually a give and take. And the mentor actually gets a lot from the mentee, just like the mentee does the mentor. And I think when I first sought out my first mentor, that's what I tried to make it about, was what I could give to the relationship so that that person would want to work with me. And I'll give an example. So when I was at the Mets, I was an inside sales representative. I wanted to be an AE. I was making 120 phone calls a day just so I could go do that. And I started asking people if they would mentor me in a very transactional way. I'd say, hey, Cynthia, like, would you mentor me? And of course, everyone's going to say yes. Like, everyone's a nice person, but that doesn't actually do the trick. What I realized was I needed to find somebody that wanted to get into sales leadership, that could leverage our mentee-mentor relationship to learn how to build coaching skills, learn how to build leadership skills, and leverage that in their story as well. And finding a mentor that aligned with what they wanted with what I wanted was very helpful in identifying the right mentor for me, someone that was really going to put in just as much as they were going to get out. And that was very effective in helping me find my first mentor and helping me grow within the company. I mean, that person helped me really get 2 different promotions because they really wanted to take a people management role as opposed to an individual contributor role. And that realization for me was very powerful in driving a strong mentee-mentor relationship.
Awesome. Thanks. That's good tips. I appreciate that.
Yeah, good question.
Shafi, I don't know if you're here still or not.
I am here. My camera is off. I have kids running around. Appreciate it. Oh, thank you very much. So thank you, Scott. I actually started an SDR role. Thank you very much, Scott and Emmy, for supporting me on that. My first day TNS was like 3 weeks ago. So my challenge right now with that new role is how do I balance between what I learned from outside, for example, the webinars, the TNS, and the other platforms that I regularly attend, versus the brand voice that the company demands of me? How do I balance between that two, specifically when I wanted to have my own kind of brand, personal brand?
That's a great question. And I'll be super honest. 9 out of 10 brand voices, or what the company demands of you in terms of like how to talk about it, is generally garbage. I don't mean to be a jerk. I don't mean to like, call out companies and hardworking marketing folks. But I found that whenever people are asking you to stay within a box, that's not generally a good idea. The best innovations in the world are not done because people stayed in a box. And I think that when you're being asked to basically not be yourself, right? Let's call it what it is, and stay within a box, you are naturally going to be less successful than if you are yourself. It takes much more energy. It takes much more focus to not be yourself than it does to be yourself. And, if you're expected to not be who the person they hired, it's not going to end well for anybody. So my personal opinion is, given that, Scott, this is your patron, I'm assuming that cussing is not only allowed, but encouraged. Fuck the brand voice, be yourself, use your own voice. And if it gets to a point where the company is asking you to step back into their box, it may not be the right company for you.
Good.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay, I want to ask like a tactical question on behalf of folks. Let's say you're in charge of building out a comp plan and a career path, Josh, for your AE organization or your SDR organization, okay? Not everybody wants to move into leadership. Not everybody wants to move out of an organization. How do you structure these things? How do you build increases in base salary, increases in OTE, increases in title, responsibility potentially? How do you appeal to people who maybe don't want to go into leadership and keep them around?
Yeah, good question. I'll actually plug. So last year, I ran the State of Sales Development on behalf of Revenue Collective, now Pavilion. We're running that again this year. And one of the most frustrating metrics that I saw that came out of that was SDRs in their second year as an SDR made, I think, $72,000 a year OTE. In year 3, they made $82,000 a year. If you look at the inflation number just from forget about the last year, because I know inflation's going up like crazy. There's a lot of concerns there. But if we look at inflation from 2019 to 2020, that inflation number was greater than the increase of that SDR from year 2 to year 3, which is a big problem because effectively those SDRs got pay cuts, which is not fair to SDRs that are in a year 3 SDR is more than likely an incredibly not only powerful pipeline generator, but an incredibly valuable member to the team, because more than likely they're working with one, if not multiple AEs that they've been working for a number of years. They probably have a number of similar accounts. They may have a territory they're very good at, but that is a weapon. I'll just be candid. That SDR is an incredibly valuable piece of the organization. They almost become a strategic piece of your sales team if you have that continuity in an SDR role that I believe industry standards have only at 14 to 15 months is the average lifespan of an SDR. So year 3, you're talking, year 3, 36 months, right? 25 to 36 months. And if you're going to build in a compensation plan and you want to incentivize people to stay in the role that they're in, you need to offer them something that will actually keep them in seat. And that's not a 3K OTE raise. That's probably increasing base to realistically an industry best, right? And an industry best base, based upon what my knowledge is we'll just use an SDR because AEs will probably depend on the industry and the TAM and the segment. But for an SDR, you're typically looking at a base salary of about $80,000. That's about industry best. If someone's going into their third year of an SDR, you need to build that into your model. So typically, as a leader, as someone that's developing comp plans, you have bands that you work within. So for an SDR, I know that at Lob, our band of a base salary for a 1-year SDR, I think, is between 40 and 60,000 base salary. The OTE, I believe the band is an additional 40 to 60,000. We like to pay our SDRs at an industry best, which is around $100,000 OTE. So I'm leaving $20,000 on the table within my band to increase that SDR's salary year over year. So at a minimum, if they're with me for year 2, their OTE will increase by $10,000. Now, Scott, going back to your question, some of it is going to depend on the actions you're looking for, right? You always want to incent the behaviors that you want. But from just a salary perspective, you need to build it into your bands so that when that SDR reaches year 2 and year 3, you can automatically, I mean, it's just like snapping a finger, they move up $10K each time if they are still within the same role. And if you decide that, hey, you know what, you want to be here moving forward, you need to find ways to compensate that SDR additionally. Now, is that if the SDR is going to be an SDR for 10 years, are they guaranteed a 10K raise? I don't know. It probably depends on the accounts they're going after. You probably want to put more on the variable than you do the base to offer some upside, to offer, again, some motivation to really drive that. But at a bare minimum, you need to be offering legitimate raises to people, not what ends up being a pay cut after you take inflation into account.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Any last questions for Josh? We got about 10 minutes or so left if we want to use it. Shy people. No?
This is Michael. Actually, I had a question about the base increase for the SDRs. How close or behind quota play a factor into that annual raise of 10K?
It's a great question. To me, and you know, I'll just be candid, I don't know that it necessarily plays all that much of a factor with me for a couple of reasons. Number one, if the SDR is so far below quota that you're asking yourself, like, boy, how much should I give them on a base salary versus a variable? I think you need to have a different conversation. And I don't mean to be a jerk, but I think that if that becomes a question, there needs to be an additional conversation around, like, what are the right performance metrics and performance bars that this person needs to hit for me to feel comfortable just giving them a 10K increase in base, just as I would a 10K increase in variable. The interesting part that I found is most organizations that I've been a part of are actually more concerned with giving it on the variable than on the base, because the base is projectable. We know that it's 10K, we can budget for it, we can give it done. The variable, because it can potentially swing one way or the other so significantly, it's sometimes harder to project. And it's a lot harder to project with a high performing team. And I'll give you an example. At WalkMe, our team was performing at such a high level throughout the entire team that I was told that no longer was I going to be able to offer a 60-40 base variable split, because we were blowing the variable out of the water, and the organization had to allocate more money to the BDR team because of it. So what I would say is have the conversation, get a sense from the SDR or AE on what they prefer, whether that's base or variable, and then understand, what you're able to do and not able to do. But I think if you're having a conversation around, like, if someone is under quota, and that affecting whether you would give it on variable or base, you probably need to have a conversation around performance before you have the conversation about the base variable split.
I appreciate that insight. No, that's good. I wonder though, that I would imagine there's got to be kind of a minimum. I don't know if it's like, 80% to quota, 90% to quota. Like, what would you say would be like fair and generous in that regard?
Yeah, I think anyone that's under about 80%, it really just on a monthly or quarterly basis, like I'm already going to be digging into. Generally when I'm going through raises and going through like how much goes on the base, how much goes on the variable, I typically default to half of it goes to your base, half of it goes to your variable, so that you have upside, but you also have some security. And then I just ask the SDR AE, like, hey, what do you prefer? Do you want 10K on your base? Do you want 10K on your variable? Because it's no skin off my back. I don't really care what they decide. I want them to be happy, and I want them to be motivated to continue to crush. So whatever they say, I'm pretty much going to be okay with. But I generally just default to 50% goes to base and 50% goes to variable.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nikki, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, what do you think, Josh? So there's a team that's comprised of 2 SDRs and let's say 1 AE. The AE has performed to a level that it's time to promote that person, and there's a need, but there is still a need for, obviously, for the sales talent. What if we're transitioning the SDRs into a full cycle role? Have you seen that work? How? Tell me the things.
So I just want to confirm some of the context. So the business need to promote the AE. Is that promoting that AE up market, or is that promoting that AE to leadership?
Up market.
Up market. So like they're going from, SMB to commercial, for example.
Yep.
Okay. And then the question is, how do you turn an SDR into a full cycle rep?
Right.
So I have seen this work a couple of times, actually. We actually literally did this at Lob like 3 to 4 months ago. There's a couple of things that I think are really important to do. Number one is you need to define the TAM of the full cycle SDR, and potentially the ICP as well. So if there's a business need that exists for the AE already, you probably already know what the TAM is and what the ICP is. You need to define that for the SDR. What accounts are they working? Is it geographic based? Is it product based? Is it employee size based? What's the segment that you're going to create? Are the accounts in Salesforce? Are they not? And then the process needs to be created around that discussion to enable the ISR or SMB AE, whatever you want to title the person, to have enough to go after. Then secondly, the way that I would try to model this out is using probably a unit of economic model to identify what revenue to OTE, or excuse me, revenue to OTE ratio you want the ISR or full cycle rep to have, because then you can define success. If your ISR is contributing at a 3.5, we'll call it, revenue to OTE ratio, then if that's what success looks like, they need to have enough to actually go after and sink their teeth into that. If they're making, I'm just making the number up because it's easy, $100,000 a year, it's actually very easy for you to set the quota, right? Then the quota becomes 350 or 365,000. And if they hit the quota, you've got the 3.5 revenue to OTE ratio, you've got success there. And now it's about figuring out whether you want to scale that and whether you don't. So I would start with understanding what that person's TAM is and what they're actually going after. And if you can define that, then you can define what success looks like and then create a quota and compensation plan around it.
Thank you so much. You never disappoint, do you, Josh?
Well, I try not to.
All right, maybe there's time for one more if we can sneak one in. Anybody have one?
Shafi had one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Josh, thank you very much for 1.5 hour marathon here. Thank you. What would be your best advice for a new SDR to succeed in the role? to showcase that he or she is presenting the potential to be AE and and have a positive career path.
Great question. I always like to answer this as simply as I can, which is hustle. There's, as a new SDR, there's not all that much you can control, right? Like you can't control any sort of territory you get. You can't control any sort of AE that you get, or if there's a round robin, right? But what you can control is how many meetings you book, how many calls you make, how many prospects you add into sequences. And I think that the best thing that I learned is when you start a new role, particularly as an SDR, really the only thing you can control is your hustle. What are your daily metrics, right? How many calls you make and how many emails are you sending? How many LinkedIn touches are you putting in? And I've always felt that to make a name for yourself, the best way to do that at the beginning is to just hustle, do the right things the right way, and everything else will figure themselves out in the long run. So I think the best advice I would give is hustle and learn.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right, Josh, you want to leave us with any closing thoughts?
Boy, I mean, first of all, just thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate it. And I guess the closing thoughts that I would have is, no matter how good or bad things look one day, they can always turn the next. Success is never permanent and failure is never fatal.
All right. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thanks all the newcomers. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Y'all.